If you've seen them before on part one, the Sub 2 Cowboys are back. Brian and John bring you all the rest of the information you need to know when investing with your self-directed IRA in a Sub 2 transaction. This presentation is for educational purposes only. American IRA, headquartered in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, is a neutral third-party administrator on behalf of the custodian New Vision Trust Company, a state-chartered trust company based in South Dakota also, and does not offer investment advice or endorsements. We are not responsible for statements made by others, and references to we and us refer to American IRA only. We encourage you to do your own due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before making any investment decisions. Hi there, everyone, and welcome back to the IRA Saloon this time, not just the cafe, powered by American IRA. I'm Kyle Moody. I'm your MC for today. I'm part of the sales team here at American IRA, and we couldn't be more happy to bring you part two of what you saw a couple weeks ago with the Sub 2 Cowboys. We will get to them in just a second. They are visiting here straight from the Ponderosa, and we're looking forward to the message that they are bringing everyone today. So for everyone over here on the East Coast and all of our friends on the West Coast that are finishing up breakfast or brunch over there, or for everyone in between, we welcome you again. And remember, you can see these presentations and others from the past and what's coming up in the future. If you want to go to our website at American IRA, see everything that you need to see there, all of our educational materials. You can also see these videos anytime you'd like on YouTube. Feel free to watch those, subscribe, like anything, leave us comments. Feel free to also give me a call anytime you'd like to ask me any questions about these and other presentations. Kyle Moody, 828-412-8123, or you can email me directly at Kyle@American IRA. If social media is your thing, also find us on Facebook. Like us on there and be up to date with everything that is going to be rolling down hill and ending up as great information for you to join us live and watch. So before we get to our guest next week, remember to join us as we have Greg Lafferty with Branch Wealth Partners, and he is going to be bringing a great presentation of his background, where he started, and how he has built an enterprise building wealth with build to rent. So trust me when I tell you, I've seen this presentation. You do not want to miss that. And Greg, great guy. So without further ado, want to go ahead and bring in those ropers here to the saloon to join us today. We've got Brian Elam and John Hamrick, who, if you joined us a couple weeks ago, you did see their presentation on Sub 2 and investing Sub 2. Some of the things to consider, really all the deep diving, all the things that really go on behind the scenes of, quite frankly, any real estate deal out there, but especially one as intricate as this. Keep in mind that you are able to do this type of investing with your self-directed IRA. So as part two begins today, they are going to finish up where they left off, giving you some more information on really the great design of Sub 2 investing. And near the end of their presentation, they're going to be diving in on what it's going to look like and how you can do it with your self-directed IRA. Remember also to have any of your questions ready for them. I'm really directing the questions to them today as the legal mind, as the insurance mind, but also as the mind of investors over the past few decades. They understand it all and they've seen it all, and they are here specifically for you. Without further ado, guys, this is all you. Brian and John, take it away.
Good morning.
Thanks, Kyle. Glad to be here. We are, this is the part two of Subject to Investing, and a lot of times if you want to find the gold, you got to dig a little deeper. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper today and go into a little more detail, and we will love to have questions from you guys. Again, I'm John Hamrick, and my
I'm Brian
partner is Brian Elam. and this is subject to investing. And I'm going to read the disclaimer this time. Not that Brian messed it up last time, but I just like it. And while we are handsome and brilliant, we are also an insurance professional and attorney, though we are not both. We are, however, not necessarily your insurance agent or attorney. Nothing presented should be taken as insurance or legal advice. All questions presented will be accepted as hypothetical and will be answered as such. In order to get actual insurance or legal advice, you will need to pay individually, consult with at least one of us, and pay exorbitant consultation fees. That's more of a joke. But if you're still reading this slide, you've ridden off into the sunset, and we'll see you next time. So just to recap, and I'll let Brian. Well, no, I'll talk about what Brian has done. He says he's not as long in the tooth as I am. That just means he's younger. But he's got over 2 decades of experience with in the law profession, and specialized in real estate law. He's too patient of an investor, but he's learned a lot over his 15 years with Triad RIA. And Brian, since I don't want to brag on myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So John has been part of the Triad RIA about as long as I have. And the Triad RIA is a local real estate investors association. If you've never heard of such a group, there's probably one near you. And quite frankly, they're great organizations to be a part of, just because you get to rub elbows with other investors and learn a lot. But John knows the most about the broadest areas of P&C insurance, more than any other insurance professional I deal with. And so we've worked for many, many years together trying to make sure that our mutual clients, and sometimes even somebody that's only a client of one of us, has the best insurance coverage possible. So, John, I highly respect what you do.
And that's mutual. Just to recap, the duties of a cowboy, we want to protect the risk from the buyer's perspective and satisfy the mortgagee or the mortgage lender. We want to make sure that your investment is protected by using the right attorney and the right agent. And to drive it home, Brian wants to make closing as easy as possible by making sure that everyone is on the same page. So, welcome to Subject to Cowboys, Subject to Part 2. Brian, I'll let you handle this one.
All right.
I'll ask you to handle this one.
Yeah. So part of our central teaching from last time, if you were able to make it, you'll remember this. But one of the things that we talked about last time is the ownership structure of a trust. And that word actually is hyper important in these types of transactions because you're seeking trust from a lot of people. First of all, you should be asking yourself, why would a seller trust me to take ownership of a property without paying off her loan? And that's a question you're going to need to wrestle with. And I guarantee you it's a question that sellers are going to ask you. So we'll talk about a little bit of that, like what that would look like and how you can become a trustworthy investor, someone who can be trusted with these types of transactions. Also, you might have some other partners in the transaction, other lenders. If you're going to rehab and flip the property, you're going to have maybe contractors. Again, what kind of trust level is needed in this? And then the really central legal question is using the trust structure to own a property helps to prevent a lender from calling the loan due. And we'll get into the details of that, but high level, it has to do with some federal legislation that's out there that the lender just assumes applies. It does not in any way apply to your transaction, but the lender assumes it. And also from an insurance perspective, it helps things to not trigger the lender's awareness that the property has been transferred. That's what we refer to as the due on sale provision, as a provision within the security instrument or deed of trust that secures the loan. And the lender's number one way of figuring out that a sale has occurred is through the hazard insurance. And so when we use a trust, that works. Now, here's the good news for you, with an eye towards investing in your self-directed IRA. If you are with American IRA, which is what John and I always call it, but is technically New Vision Trust Company, it's already in the name. And I don't know if you know this, but I actually always teach this. One of the acceptable methods for titling real estate purchased within your self-directed IRA is to have the custodian, the letters FBO, and then your name, like Brian Elam IRA. However, it is also acceptable to most of the custodians I've ever worked with to do that beginning structure, but have your account number rather than your name. And so American IRA does permit you to use your account number. And guess what? The word trust is right in the name of the custodian. So I think it's an even more direct method with using your self-directed IRA. If you are with American IRA, you can just say New Vision Trust, FBO, and then your account number. The federal legislation that we're talking about is this Garn-St. Germain Act. And so first of all, we know in our political system that most of the time when you get legislation like this, and you could read through it, it's really boring. I'll give you the 40,000 foot view. But essentially what it says is that if you own a primary residence, so you own some real estate that you live in and you have a mortgage secured by that real estate, you can transfer the ownership of that real estate into a estate planning trust that would otherwise violate the terms of your deed of trust. But this legislation prevents your lender. It's federal, so it prevents all lenders in the U.S. from foreclosing or calling the loan due because of the transfer. Now, that's one of the reasons why we use a trust structure, is because lenders are now very comfortable with this. This legislation's been around for over a decade, maybe longer, actually. I'd have to go back and look. But it's been around for a long time. And so lenders are more and more accustomed to this because more and more people are transferring their primary residence into estate planning trusts so that they can avoid probate, or maybe they only have minor children, so they want to make sure it doesn't get tied up in court, and those types of things. So when a lender sees a trust as an owner, it often will just assume that this applies. Now, I want to make clear, your investment transaction in no way complies with the Garn-St. Germain Act. However, you do not have an active duty to tell the lender that it does not comply. Now, if the lender starts asking you questions, you want to always be honest. You definitely do not want to be in a situation where you lied to the lender, because that violates all kinds of federal rules. But if they just assume it, you don't have any kind of active obligation to dissuade them from what they might be believing.
I will tell you that Brian will, when he introduces himself, he'll talk about helping you make money, and of course, he's a fantastic attorney and is one of the smartest attorneys I know. But he talks a lot about keeping his clients out of jail initially. So it's a lot easier to stay out of jail than it is to get out of jail. So again, we want to reiterate that if the lender starts asking questions, they need to be answered honestly. And the outcome, as we said in part one, is you've got to be prepared to exit the property if need be. But it's not always the case of the lender foreclosing. Sometimes if they're made aware of the situation and the loan's been caught up and it's performing, doesn't always have to end that way by them, calling in the note. So one of the things that I'm going to ask Brian to cover again is how a normal real estate closing differs from a subject to closing, and it's not just what happens at the table at the attorney's office, but it's what happens after that meeting is concluded, and the ongoing stuff, and part of it is legal, part of it's insurance, and we'll just jump in where it's appropriate. But take it
Yeah.
away, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. So I assume that most of the folks on the webinar today have participated in what we refer to as a normal closing. In our office, we have a joke that there's no such thing as a normal closing because everyone has its own little quirks and conditions. But normally, an investor understands what type of paperwork is going to be required from the time we go under contract until the time I get a copy of my filed deed. And through those closings, a subject to closing is very similar. It has all the paperwork of a normal closing, but we do some additional paperwork. And all that additional paperwork is either directly related to how are we going to manage the loan payments for the loan that's going to stay in place, or how are we going to make sure that when the seller decides that what they did was not a good idea, that we've disclosed up front to the seller exactly what they were getting into. So we don't get into a situation where the seller makes some kind of argument that you pressured them into this, or that you were untruthful with what the nature of the transaction was like, and they didn't understand. We want to make sure, and we over disclose. We start disclosing at the contract level, and we have final disclosures at the day of closing. And they're all designed to scare off your seller. And that makes some of my clients frustrated. But as John was just alluding to, I'd rather us figure out before you expend the money to purchase the property that this seller does not want to do the transaction. Then 6 months later, when you put even more money into the property, and all of a sudden they're calling the attorney general, they're calling other lawyers, and it gets really messy. John mentioned the exit strategy. And so obviously, if you've been investing for any time, you've heard the exit strategy language. We're very familiar with this concept. I will say in a subject to transaction, it's an even more necessary component to think of. So when a lender calls the loan due, that sounds very, very scary. Normally, you've got 6 to 9 months to resolve the issue. So from the moment the lender sends you the first love letter, which hopefully you get, they may only send it to the seller. But normally the sellers are nervous about that letter, so they call you and want to know what the heck's going on in the kindest and least colorful language. But the idea is you're going to have a pretty short window where you're going to need to figure out whether or not you can resolve the lender's nervousness about the property being transferred, or whether or not you're going to have to pay that loan off in full, either by refinancing, selling, something. The post-closing portion, I can't, we actually had it on there twice, and last night when John and I were making some final edits, we removed one. But the reason we have communicate with the seller on there twice is because it's that important. And I was telling John, I just had this come up where we had a client that we had helped handle one of these transactions 13 years ago, and the client, for whatever reason, had lost touch with the seller. Her number didn't work. He didn't know where she had moved to. You know, this happens. 13 years is a long time. That's sometimes we lose our family members in a decade. And so that communication, though, is going to be very important, because there's going to come a day when you may need the seller's assistance in getting this thing finished off. And also, I find that my most successful clients that handle subject to transactions just regularly check in with the seller. I've made this analogy before that having a subject to transaction is like getting divorced with kids. because the former property owner is giving you complete ownership of the property, but y'all still have this thing together. You're making the monthly payments on their mortgage, but it's their mortgage. And so whether or not you like it, they're connected to your transaction. So I find that the most successful clients I have, you don't have to like the seller. They don't have to come over for Thanksgiving, but you just need to check in with them once and again. My best clients do it about every 6 months just to say, hey, Miss Smith, just want to let you know things are going great with the property, just like we had thought. And thank you again. Do you have any questions? And honestly, just that little bit of a check-in does so much to stave off future issues with the seller. You've got to get the appropriate paperwork to their lender. Now, the biggest portion of the paperwork that you're going to need to get to the lender is related to the hazard insurance. And John's going to talk more in detail about that. But back to not lying to the lender, they're going to ask you questions and you're going to be scared to answer them because you don't want to say the wrong thing. And so John and I offer this service to both of our clients. Is if you get approached by the lender and you have questions that you don't think you can answer, just turn them over to us, because obviously we work for you and we'll try and help navigate that. And it's funny enough, John and I have learned over the years to simply ask them why they need what they're asking for. And many times that ends the conversation because they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, I thought I needed it. No, there you go. You've got it. Don't worry about it. So that's an interesting pro tip solution. All righty. You got to get a lot of paperwork from the seller. But here's a cool development that has happened just in the time that I've been handling these transactions. More and more lenders have online portals for managing the mortgage. Now, some of them, like Wells Fargo's online portal, if the people have Wells Fargo bank accounts and like their car loan is there and their home loan, you're not going to be able to do this, because when you log on to that Wells Fargo portal, you can see everything financially for that person at Wells Fargo. But if they've got like a Mr. Cooper loan and that's the only thing that they have with them, you can actually share login information to that portal so that you and the seller can each log in. We tell the sellers, you can log in and make sure my client's making the payments like they promised you they would. And then my client gets to log in and can make sure the payments are getting made, make sure the taxes and the insurance from the escrow account are properly paid, make sure the addresses in the system are the client's address, not the seller's address, kind of verify all that information. But the joint login thing is way better than it used to be, where you had to get little pieces of paper and hope you didn't lose it and the lender would still take it. Goodness gracious. John, I know you're going to talk about checking up on the hazard insurance every year. So I'm going to skip that for right now. And then you're going to have to deal with authorization to the lender. So we typically get two types of authorization: just a blanket authorization to release information, which some lenders take, not all. Some lenders take for a short period of time, not forever. We also get a limited power of attorney just to deal with that loan. And some lenders take it, they're all supposed to, and some lenders only take it for a short amount of time. So you're going to want to make sure that we get that paperwork to the lender as soon as possible so they can go ahead and get you in their system as an authorized person to talk to on the account. All right. So John, why don't you take it away talking about the insurance post-closing?
The insurance post-closing, and I may, there may be some of this on our next slide. And if there is, I apologize. But when you get the insurance information, both prior to closing, well, actually it is post-closing for this case. The thing about it is once you close on this property, it is your property. It's still the seller's mortgage, but you are the one that is taking the risk at that point. And so you want to make sure that you have insurance coverage when you close. And part of that is, and it depends on what you're going to do with the property. So I'm going to divide it into two different categories. If this is going to be a tenant occupied property that you're going to hold for as long as possible, then we'll put a rental policy in place in the trust name. We will name the seller as an additional insured as their interest may appear. Uh, you know what their interest is. I know what their interest is. But it always helps when you send the paperwork to the mortgage company that somewhere on that policy their client's name appears,
Mhm.
and it needs to appear exactly the same way it appears on the deed of trust. So any help you can give your agent in getting that information is helpful. Uh, if you are going to say take over, start making the mortgage payments, and this is going to be a fix and flip, then that might be a situation where you want to leave the seller's policy in place so the mortgage company is satisfied that there's coverage on the property. Once the property is sold, their homeowner's policy does not respond to any loss because it's designed for an owner occupancy, and you don't have that any longer. So we would put a builder's risk policy in place in the name of the trust as well. I'm just not going to share that policy information with the lender. That's just to cover your end for your potential losses. Uh, if we get to the point where there's a claim and it's a total loss, then we can address that. That has to be coordinated as well. But if it's a buy and hold, typically we'll try to coordinate the cancellation of the seller's policy with the start date of your policy. And what I prefer to do is let the seller cancel, send the cancellation in. The insurance company is going to notify the lender that that policy is no longer in force. And so the lender is going to come to the seller, and hopefully you have the proper paperwork so that you can talk to the lender. But when you get notification that they're aware of the policy cancellation, I'm going to suggest that you send it to the insurance agent, or send it, if you're using me, then send it to me and let me handle it. I can send an evidence of insurance that will satisfy them. I usually like to wait a few days before I issue the new policy, as long as I can maintain that effective date that we need. Usually like to wait a few days to give the cancellation a chance to get there first. Because if the cancellation gets there, and of course, assuming that the insurance is escrowed, I will tell you the bill for the escrow goes out a lot faster than the policy does. And if the mortgage company gets a bill for escrow and they don't have a cancellation to go against it, they're just going to send a letter back saying, "Hey, we paid the hazard insurance premium and we're not going to pay it twice."
Right.
And so there's a method to that, and it's all up to the company that you're placing the new coverage with as to how much time you can gamble on that. But I will almost always wait 4 or 5 days. It's a little bit riskier for me in case I forget or I'm struck down by a bus, but I have backups in place just in case. And so that's part of the subject to strategy is you want the mortgagee to get the seller's cancellation, if not before, at about the same time that they get the new information for the insurance. And then, if the seller or if the lender comes back with questions, like Brian said, I would prefer that if I'm your agent, refer them to me, and I will answer questions, or I'll ask questions and try to stop it before it goes too far. But I use general terms. Sometimes the questions I get is, this policy is not in our client's name, and I'll just say, listen, the owner of the property has put it in a trust, and your client is named as an additional insured, so your interests in the note are protected. and that's not, I'm not volunteering information they're not asking about, but that's enough to satisfy them. And the truth of the matter is, if you have the property insured, uh, then in your agreement with the seller, you are in a total loss. You would pay off the note.
Mhm.
There is a lien on the property, so there's not anything you can do with it, until you pay that off. And so I can get away with that, and I don't get nervous about it because I've done a lot of these. And so sometimes the confidence in which you speak with a lender kind of satisfies any questions, underlying questions they might have. And so sometimes we can stop the conversation before it gets too deep, and we end up having to answer a question we prefer not to. And then sometimes we get questions on the renewal if it goes further, and that's one of the reasons why Brian said, and we're going to suggest that if you are going to place a subject to property in an IRA, uh, American IRA will, you can own more than one IRA with them, and we're going to suggest that perhaps you open a new IRA with the account name on it, because nothing's going to trigger a hazard insurance problem worse than a policy that says New Vision Trust Company, FBO, and somebody else's name. The insurance company or the lender's going to want to know why the benefit, this is benefiting somebody else other than the person on their deed of trust. So we maintain ongoing communication with the lender in terms of the insurance, and there are ways, if they're not particularly happy with the way a renewal goes out, because insurance companies can't always get the full name insured. I can send supplemental paperwork that gives them what they want, and of course we've got some clients that have been in subject to transactions for years without problems. And so that's why it's important to have the right attorney and the right insurance agent. If either one of those parties that you're working with asks you questions about a subject to deal, you're not working with the right people. So uh, understanding that not everybody can use Brian and myself, make sure that who you are using is are the correct people, because a mistake on their part can result in a bad outcome on your part. The next slide deals with the keys to success, and I will tell you that you got to engage your team as soon as possible. And I would say, as soon as you start talking to somebody about potentially working out a deal, you need to go ahead and start talking to your attorney and start talking to your insurance agent and any subcontractors. You're going to want to get a copy of the mortgage statement, so you'll know where they are with the loan. You'll also know who all the parties are that are going to be involved with this, and how the property's deeded. Attorneys, Brian's going to help you with that, or your attorney's going to help you with that, and knowing all those things are going to help your team support you in a way that you're going to be very successful with this, or at the very least more likely to be successful with this. And so Brian, do you want to finish up some of these again?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, John, you're entirely correct. It's not just getting the paperwork. You'll hear people say, well, I need that for my file or whatnot. Well, you need more than that. So John just gave away a critical piece of information. You need to get the current month's mortgage statement. I can't tell you how many times, a client will come to me, they'll have a mortgage statement, but it's from 6 months ago, which happens to be the last month that the borrower made a payment. So, and then all of a sudden my client calls me after closing and says, well, it was $13,000 behind. Guess who's going to pay that? It's not the seller. They're not paying that. So you need to see the current month's mortgage statement. It's going to give you all kind of information. So, if the mortgage statement is in the name of dead mama, you need to go to the seller and say, who's this dead mama? And then they'll start telling you a story, and it's going to help us understand, can the person you're talking to even agree to sell you the property? Because they may not be the owner or all the owners. So it's get the paperwork, look over it. Another thing that happens when you work with a good insurance agent is they underwrite the property. So the agent will actually do some research, actually pull up reports that only insurance companies have, that can tell you about claims made on the property, work that was done when those claims were made, all kinds of things, and tell you things like, oh, this looks like this is a true story. This looks like a stick-built house, but there's a single-wide trailer in the middle of it. 5-bedroom, front porch house in Guilford County, North Carolina, was a single-wide trailer because at one point it was a single-wide trailer in the middle. Well, that pops up on the insurance. So there's a lot of information. Don't just get little pieces of paper, read them, go over them, and share the information with everyone. I cannot tell you how important it is for you to be honest with your insurance agent, what your plan is for the property. They need to know, because if you just call your insurance agent and say, hey, I need to insure this house, and it's going to be a rental house, but you don't tell your agent it's got 9 months worth of renovation before it's going to be ready to rent, they're going to get you an insurance policy that will not actually cover you should a claim occur. So if your electrician that's rewiring the whole house leaves the breaker panel on and exposed wires out and it burns down the structure, your insurance company is going to say, we're not paying that because you didn't have the proper insurance in place. So definitely fully disclose. John is correct. If you start talking to people about doing the subject to transaction, and I will tell you that a lot of insurance professionals and attorneys don't even understand how to deal with a self-directed IRA owner of real estate. So if you throw on top of that you're going to also be doing the subject to transaction, their eyes will glaze over, and you'll be able to see it, like you'll know it, that they haven't had experience with this. And just understand, if you're willing to walk them through and teach them, and if you're competent to do that, then you can do it, right? We don't want to damage anybody's professional relationships, but if you're not, then you probably are going to need to find a different professional to work with for these transactions.
Brian,
Now,
I'll share a story because it seems like this is the appropriate place. And sometimes you learn that your deal is not your deal. But I had a client that was looking to buy a home, and the owners were a little bit behind, and this was not a subject to deal, but this is where contacting the insurance agent early on helped out, in that the owners of the home knew that they were in a position where they were going to have to sell the house. And so they had a water claim that was substantial, talking about 5-figure payout.
oof.
And so, knowing that they were going to sell the house, they just took the insurance check and went on a trip and never repaired any of the damage. Well, the water eventually evaporated, but you had all kinds of damage to drywall in the lower floor, and that should have been removed at the time of loss, but they never did anything with it. And somebody contacted me and said, I need to get, see what insurance is going to cost on this house. And two things happened. One, we found out that there was a major water claim, and that cued the buyer to question the seller as to what repairs had been made. Found out after a tug of war that no repairs had been made. And guess what that did? That triggered no insurance on the dwelling, no insurance available on the dwelling, because an insurer doesn't want to buy a problem. And so engage your team early. No telling what you might learn.
And John, what happens to the new owner if the previous owner has made claims for that property? Like, what happens to their rates?
Well, yeah, insurance is not only underwritten by the owner or the policyholder, but it's also in this habitational market, it's underwritten by the location. So they'll look at how many claims the insured has filed, and it's not always the size; it could be the frequency. But they'll also look at the number of claims on that particular property because it's always reported, and they love to share information because insurance companies don't want another insurance company to get stuck either, and so there's a cooperation there. And so either the rate is going to be really high, or you're just not going to be able to get insurance until you can prove to a new carrier that all of the damage has been repaired or removed or whatever, and that is typically at the buyer's expense if they find out about it after close.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for expounding.
And rates are already high enough. You don't need to get into something that's going to just absolutely wreck your cash flow.
Yeah. Well, rate won't matter if you can't get insurance, because even
That's
private money
exactly right.
lenders are going to require you to have insurance. So real estate investing is high level investing anyway. It's not like buying Coca-Cola stock on the stock market. It's definitely not as regulated. It is regulated, but it's not as regulated as some of those financial instruments that you'll use. So it's already more difficult. When you add the layer of taking ownership of the property subject to the former owner's debt, it just makes it a more advanced investing strategy. And so you need to keep that in mind. Now, one question that you would ask yourself as an investor is, why would I do this? These sound pretty risky, and like they have a lot of tripwires and pitfalls, and you would be correct. They do. The reason why is the opportunity to gain more is higher, and why the reason for that is not because you can take advantage of people, but it's because you reduce the amount of capital you have to put in the project. So, if you've done any real estate investing at all, you know that one of the primary concerns is, how much money am I going to have to put into this, and how much money am I going to get out of it? And so, if you're looking to buy a rental and you do not have to use your credit, and you only have to put the equity difference in the property, not the total value of the property, well, you can see quickly how that just exponentially increases the investments that you can make with these subject to transactions. So there is an opportunity to actually gain more on your investment. So they are worth pursuing. But you have got to realize that all of these subject to transactions are going to take more hustle, more paperwork, more time. They're going to cost more, believe it or not, because you might think there's only $10,000 in equity that needs to come out, but then you get the current month's mortgage payment. And I have seen these recently. I call it the shadow foreclosure market. We could have a whole nother discussion about it, where payments have not been made on the loan in over a year and a half. Now, we're going to have to resolve that before you take ownership, because that is a substantial default, and you just don't want to buy that kind of problem. But anytime I say we're going to have to resolve that, you should get out your checkbook, because it's just going to cost more. You're going to need to become a better investor. You're going to need to get more knowledge, more training. I joke about it often because I don't like it, but go to YouTube University, but don't stop there. You need to talk to local professionals, people who know your state and your jurisdiction. I mean, if you're in New York City, the city is going to have lots of rules about how you handle these transactions, not just the state of New York. So you've got to make sure you're using local professionals. And then you got to figure out what makes you wake up at 2:30 in the morning and not be able to fall back to sleep. And not every client that I have has the risk tolerance to be able to handle a subject to investment. And so if it worries you that the lender might call the loan due, just on principle alone, if it worries you, then this probably isn't the transaction for you. So you've got to kind of go through this this checklist, and then finally, you've got to realistically assess your ability to resolve conflict. Because, and John, I'm sure you'll back me up on this, these transactions always have conflict. Remember my analogy, divorce with kids? There's conflict there, right? Like, which McDonald's parking lot are we going to meet in to exchange custody according to our arrangement? There's conflict there. And if you don't have an ability to resolve conflict, then I would shy away from these transactions. All right, John, do you want to talk a little bit about the post-closing concerns?
Yeah, and we've kind of talked about this, but it's on here twice because it is so important. That either both prior to closing and post closing, you need to make sure you understand and have what the expectations are for the seller, because after they close this deal, they're going to be relieved, and then after it sinks in, or they go to CarMax to buy a car, and they can't buy the car because their debt to income ratio isn't sufficient. And what do you mean? I don't owe any money. Well, it shows here that you have a mortgage. Well, guess who they're going to be mad at? And so I know that Brian uses forms in closing that discloses all this information, and maybe they read it, maybe they don't, but they signed off on it, and sometimes they need a reminder. So just make sure that the expectations on both sides of the deal are met or exceeded. Continued interaction with the lender, continued interaction with the insurance. At some point, if you decide to sell the property, you may have to deal with a future closing attorney that has no idea what a subject to deal is. And I know that Brian's been dealing with a situation similar to this. And, if the closing attorney for the sale, the second buyer's attorney doesn't understand this deal, then that can be a problem as well. And then dealing with seller remorse. But the other thing that we talked about in the prior slide too was maintaining contact with the seller.
Right.
And this is so important on all aspects, but particularly in case of a claim. Because if we name that seller as an additional insured on the insurance policy that you have, if the claim is large enough, there's a very good chance that the check is going to made out to all the insured parties. And so you may have a check made out to your trust, and to the additional insured as their interests may appear. So you're going to have contact with them in case they have to endorse that check.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to get them to do that for free when they're looking at a $240,000 check, John.
Well, that's true. And so if you have the correct paperwork from closing, and that situation was addressed,
yes,
or maybe it needs to be if it wasn't. But yeah, you're right. A lot of times they want to know, well, what's my share of that?
Right.
I paid premiums in for years.
Yeah.
And then you have to remind them that actually it was escrowed and they didn't. So you caught them up. But that's where continued communication with the seller is so important, and particularly inside of an American IRA. If you have a claim, then the check is going to have to be handled by New Vision Trust and dispersed, but you're still going to have the seller potentially endorse that check.
That's right. And John, I have a phrase. I didn't come up with it, but I love it. So I say it all the time. I'm sure you've heard me say it, is unspoken expectations are predetermined resentments. So Think
Right.
about that later. But right now, what I want to say is every expectation that a seller has is unspoken. And part of the reason for that is most people only handle fewer than 5 real estate transactions in their lifetime. So they honestly just don't even know what they expect. So they don't know to tell you what they expect. And but as soon as they feel like their unspoken expectation has been unmet, you're going to hear a complaint about it. And so you need to try and anticipate what the seller's expectations are. That's part of what we do in all our disclosures. You need to try and talk to them about what the future is going to look like. That's what we do in our disclosures. But they're going to remember your verbal conversations with them more than anything I write down on a piece of paper. And to that point, I just last week had an interaction with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. They were calling me about a subject to transaction and that telling me what the seller's claim was. She didn't understand the property was being sold, the loan's still in her name and all that. And I said, well, I've got a piece of paper here with her initials all over it saying that she understood the property was being sold and the loan was going to stay in place, and she signed it and it was notarized. And he said, oh yeah, I've seen that piece of paper. She says she didn't read it. And that's going to happen is I can do all the paper disclosures in the world, but at the end of the day, you're going to have difficult conversations with these people.
Right. And it's going to be ongoing until you end up executing your exit strategy and everybody walks away at the same time.
That's right.
I've actually created a little checklist to help you help your insurance agent. And so I'm going to share this slide with you and just kind of go through it quickly because we're kind of running out of time. But the first thing you want to do is let your insurance know what you intend to do with the property. I've talked about that before. Is this going to be a tenant occupied fix and flip? Is it vacant? Are you going to attempt to wholesale it, which is not unheard of? So contact your agent with the location address as soon as you can, as soon as you start negotiating, because again, I might be able to share information that will help you in that place. If it's a fix and flip, you're going to have to determine the current value of the property and what the estimated cost of renovation is going to be so that we have that insured properly. If it's vacant, again, you are going to have to determine how much insurance you want on that dwelling. If it's going to be held and it's going to be either owner occupied or tenant occupied, you need to know a little bit more about the property. And this is the time to ask these questions of the seller too, because they're going to be able to give you that information, or more willing to give you that information if you're helping them out of a situation that they've fallen into that's not favorable for them. But you need to come up with the name and address of the purchasing entity, and that's the trust name. Of course, if it's with an American IRA, you need to set up the IRA with the account number. And you got to be mindful of the name. So if you already have an American IRA that's for the benefit of your name, I'm going to suggest that really you open another IRA, because if let's just say that worst case scenario this thing backfires, you don't wreck the other stuff you have in your initial IRA. You're going to need the name and the mortgagee clause of the lender, which is not always just the mail to address. And a lot of times we can find that on the second or third page of the mortgage statement in a box that says insurance inquiries. So if you get a current copy of that mortgage statement, that's going to help your agent out a whole lot. It's also going to show you how they have the lender listed. And you may be dealing with Mike Smith, but the names on the deed of trust may be Mike and Cindy Smith, and you need to know that as well. So you're going to need to know about updates to the house, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, particularly the roof, because that's become tighter. And we need to know if the insurance is escrowed. because that's going to determine how we're going to handle communication with the lender. So I think we're basically coming to the end of our time.
Yeah,
and the
one,
end
one quick thing I did want to talk about, John, was UBIT, unintended business income tax. We do get a lot of questions when people are investing in their self-directed IRA with a subject to transaction. Hey, does this trigger UBIT? I'm not a CPA, and income tax was my worst grade in law school, but I'll tell you what I think, and definitely double check this. But I do not believe that a subject to holding triggers UBIT at all for two reasons. One, you've got a situation where if you do borrow money with your self-directed IRA, it cannot be a recourse loan. It has to be a non-recourse loan. That just means that the account holder cannot be individually responsible for payment. Well, that box is checked with a subject to, because the account holder has no relationship at all with this lender, so it's not possible. The other consideration is whether or not the IRA borrowed money. That box is checked no, because the IRA did not borrow money. The previous owner borrowed money. So I don't believe this does trigger a UBIT situation. We get that question a lot when people are doing subject twos in their self-directed IRAs.
Well, gentlemen, I greatly appreciate you so much again for substituting the cafe for the saloon, coming down off the Ponderosa and joining us for one more presentation on sub-2 investing, and especially being able to talk about it with someone's self-directed retirement account here at the end. A couple things I just wanted to build on with that, and then we're going to let all of you head on to the rest of your day and week. But just keep in mind some of the key points that they talked about here, and a couple of the things in the background that you need to know. Number one, John said it earlier, and then Brian echoed it as well. Make sure this is not just a one person thing, right? We are not fiduciaries at American IRA. We are not permitted to give any tax, legal, or financial advice, suggestions, or opinions. And so therefore, you are highly, highly encouraged to go out and build that team around you. But make sure that when you do it, you build it with those said professionals that truly understand the nature of self-directed IRAs, and really sometimes those creative investments that you can make. Because to Brian's point, if not, you need to find somebody that actually does. It doesn't mean that your professionals are wrong or that they just don't get it. It's just not their bailiwick, all right, and what they understand and their day-to-day. Number two, and this one's a big one, understand that yes, there's always another side of the investment, but when you're using your self-directed IRA, the onus is always going to be on our client. Okay, so it is self-directed. This is all you doing a lot of this background work. One of the things that people will think is that, money management, financial advisor. Remember, we're not that. By the time you bring us the investment, we're hoping that you are bringing us a solid, legitimate investment. Any assistance we give you on our end might be just for our side of what we do. But for the investment itself, a lot of this due diligence, seeing what goes on behind a lot of these deals. Not everyone is going to invest sub-2. Not everyone is going to invest in real estate, but just understand that no matter what you invest in, it's not just what you see here with us talking about it and then our transactions team moving the funds for closing. There's always a lot from an offer to purchase and contract to the day of closing in any real estate deal. All right. Outside of an IRA, getting your personal property, getting a regular investment property. Think about all the things that are involved in between those 2 points, and the onus is always on you to make sure that those things are covered. And lastly, I'll just go ahead and say we can only speak with our clients. Okay. These accounts are very confidential. And just keep in mind that if you're having your attorney call, if you're having your CPA call in, if you're having your insurance agent call in, hey, if you're here in North Carolina and you deal with Brian and John all the time, wonderful. I see them at least once a week on the board that we're members of our triad RIA. But that also doesn't mean that if they were to call into our office and ask a question about your account, that we're going to be able to freely discuss with them anything unless they are listed as an interested party to your account, or unless anyone is listed as an interested party to your account. If there is no one listed and someone other than you calls in, even if it is time sensitive, we will not be able to speak with them. And that's always important to know. So onus is on you. Be surrounded by the people that know what's going on. And if you need those folks to be able to call in just to get general information on the account or answer a question that even we might have, you want to make sure that they are listed as interested parties. Well, listen, I know that we are up against the clock. We've gone a little over, but we've gone over because how this presentation has just been chock full of information. That's something that you can always know that you're going to get from all of us here at American IRA, everyone on the sales deck, and then especially everyone that we are backed by in the operations department. So we will make sure that we have something else for you next week with Greg Lafferty's presentation. Make sure that you don't miss that. Again, one more time, make sure that you visit us on our website, AmericanIRA.com. Check us out on YouTube, and then you can also like us on Facebook and anywhere else that you venture into your social media. We're all out there. We thank you again for your visit to the IRA Cafe powered by American IRA. And for everyone here and for the guys, Brian and John, we say have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.